Okay, I'm beginning the recording at 12:05 p.m. on Monday, June 22nd, 2020.
And it just came up on my screen that we're being recorded, so it's working.
Yay!
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you, Heather, very much. So, Chris, you are the chair of our finance committee, and I know I tend to help out quite a bit with preparing agendas and things like that. But as you may see on the agenda, the first thing we need to do is do the declaration of electronic meeting. If you'd like, I do have that information right in front of me, and I'm happy to read it.
I think that would work, even though I could get it very easily too, but go ahead and read it.
Okay, so the declaration of meeting, the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors has determined that the nature of the declared COVID-19 virus emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for us to assemble in a single location for the purpose of transacting business statutorily required or necessary for us to continue operations and discharge our lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. So we'll just need to make a motion for that.
I'll make a motion for that.
And this is John. I'll second it.
Okay.
So, all in favor, John?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
And me, aye.
Okay.
Oh, does Jerry get to vote on the finance committee?
Well, it really is the finance committee is you, Chris, John, myself, and Heather. Jerry, you're kind of an observer today, if you're okay with that. And I would vote aye on this as well.
As do I.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Then the motion carries and we're allowed to have a meeting.
We are allowed to have our meeting. Okay, wonderful. So Chris, one of the things that we had talked about, and you might have seen before our meeting, I sent out just a few revisions, just in courtesy of John's time frame and everything, to our agenda, just some revisions to the agenda, where I would recommend that we begin with just a quick debrief from the VRS discussion that we had last week and review some of the questions and answers that Heather was kind enough to pull together. And then I'd recommend that we review the DCR grant agreements and deliverables, since John was involved in some of the discussions related to the technical assistance funding for the upcoming grant year. It would be great to talk about that while he is on the line. And then review the DCR procedures for fiscal operations and our approach for some of our policy revisions for the upcoming year, and then just talk about scheduling some of the upcoming finance committee meetings.
Sounds good. And you guys have done a lot of preparation, and you have invented a cure for insomnia with the attachments that you sent out.
It's a lot of information, that is for sure. That is for sure.
Why did you guys take the lead, since you've got so much of the paperwork and know the discussion order, and to help John get everything done he needs to do before he needs to step away?
Okay.
I'll be on until at least 1:30.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I hope we don't go that long.
I'm thinking we can be pretty. I can be a little long-winded at times, so I'll try to stay as concise as possible with some of these things. So, but I wanted to just again say thank you to Chris, you and John and Heather for all of her preparations for last week's conversation with the VRS representatives. And Heather and I were talking about it a little bit afterwards, and we were saying, I'm not sure that they, we're pretty prepared going into these meetings, and we're not sure that they always have that level of preparedness from those that are expressing interest when they go into those conversations. Heather did a great job of pulling together the responses to the questions that had come up, and she had sent some of those out. Heather, I'm not sure if there's anything in particular that you would like to discuss, or if there's any other really conversation among the four of us, in regards to the discussion
Well,
from last.
I guess I'm just curious if anybody had any questions remaining. I know there were a couple areas where we didn't get clarity. One was about whether or not, well, I shouldn't say we didn't get clarity, but we didn't have time to ask about whether there would be any opportunity to transfer Sep funds to pay for prior service. And that's a very, I think, a very technical question. So that may be something that we can discuss with them or try to get some additional information from the IRS, because I think at the end of it, it's a federal code question. But I'm just curious if there's any questions from John, Chris, or Jerry about the VRS conference call notes or about the program in general that we need to discuss.
Heather, this is John. I'll just make a couple of comments. First of all, I believe, and I apologize to everybody for having to leave that last conference call before it ended. So I may be suggesting something that you already know the answer to, and I just haven't seen it yet in Heather's summation. But first of all, I think we've all agreed we are going to pursue the report, the actuarial
Yes.
report.
Yes.
And so there's really no decision made until we get that back and can digest it.
That's
the
correct.
one thing that I really kind of was interested in answering is somebody like Willie, who's got an awful lot invested in our current program, I would presume, is he going to have the tools to be able to figure out which is best for him, given how much longer he'd like to work?
That's a question, certainly that we have as well. I'm not sure what options are available through the VRS system to run some of those analysis, John. And some of it may be that we need to think about finding somebody who can support us with that, and maybe that's a question really for us to send back to our VRS representatives and just say, is there somebody who is there who can support us with understanding what's invested and what the benefit would be on the outset. Does that make sense? So
it does. The reason I asked the question, Laura, is I remember when I was still with the federal government, we switched from the old civil service retirement system to the federal retirement system, FRE. And we actually had some tools where we could calculate which system was best for us given how long we were still going to work.
Right. So what Willie is going to have, and what all of us will have, and this is somewhat based on the actuarial study and also what the district decides to do in terms of policy, because I think it's up to the directors, the board, to decide whether we offer current staff the option of one or the other. And some of that may be based on federal regulations, whether we can. So I think that's one question. And I think the actuarial study will actually give a lot of information for the individual to make that decision. And also depending on whether or not the district is able to fund the vesting period. Because I would think that for some people, especially those who've been there as long as like Willie or Dan, you would want to be automatically vested, I would think, either through the district's buying purchase credits or through the individual buying purchase credits, especially if you're in a situation where retirement is not that far off. But I think that there's going to be a whole lot more information available after the actuarial study. Now, whether we help the employees compare those or they work with their own financial people to compare those, I think that's what Laura is mentioning, that we would kind of have to see what sort of information is available. But anyway, that's my feeling, is that the actual aerial study is actually going to give quite a bit of information, especially if we do the scenarios that we're talking about with the up to 5 years of purchase credits.
Well, I think it does, Heather, and I appreciate that. The other thing I think we need to decide, I don't know that we need to do it today, is what we define as full-time work. And I think about you when we say that because you work 30 hours a week.
Right.
I'm on the phone, so I have to go quick. For my house?
Chris, you're gonna have to repeat that. I came in a little bit jarbled.
Don't worry about that.
I'm not sure that Chris, from what I think I heard you say was that we may not need to worry about that. Let's see. Did we lose you, Chris?
I got another phone call, so I had to answer that real quick.
Oh.
So I missed what you just said.
Oh, okay, no worries. We wanted to make sure we weren't sure you were talking to us. We heard some chatter on your line, but we weren't sure you were talking to
No,
us.
I wasn't, sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Juggle about 5 things at the same time.
I know how that goes, and I apologize if you hear some banging around my house. I have 3 boys that are having to entertain themselves right now. But we were just talking, John was just mentioning that one of the things that we do need to do is establish what our full-time definition is for participation in the benefits program, and basically what those minimum hours would be in order to be able to qualify for participation.
Right, we talked about that last week.
We did. So, and there was a little bit of information that I did look up. For example, with Fairfax County, participation in the retirement health and life insurance programs is cut off at the 20-hour mark. So they do need to work a minimum of 20 hours per week in order to be able to qualify for participation in the benefits program. So I believe we continue to do that with the health insurance program, and from a consistency standpoint, it seems like that would be reasonable.
Is the health plan 20 or 30?
20.
Okay.
20 for part-time, 30 for full-time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what do you count as? Heather, what do you?
I am now full-time on the health program because I'm working 30 hours.
Okay.
Before, when I was only working 28, I was part-time.
So it was
But
worth
now the health
for
plan
2
is
hours.
independent from VRE, correct?
It is. It's independent from the Virginia retirement system, the VRS program.
By the way, and I'm just one person, but I have no problem with the 20 and 30-hour cutoff.
I think we should be consistent, and it's good that the consistency is working out.
So is what I'm hearing is that the recommendation would be for 20 hours, or just to keep it consistent with the 20, I think it would actually be the 30 hours for full time. So
I was thinking of the county 20.
My only concern is that the county considers 20 hours part-time and they consider 30 hours full-time. So
right.
I don't know if that would present a problem for justifying that 20 hours is full-time.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So Heather, what are you recommending that we set it at the 30-hour rate and just stay equivalent to the full-time as a county?
From a policy point of view, yes, it seems a little self-serving in my instance, but I think as far as the agency is concerned, to make sure that we don't run into an issue, keeping consistent with what the county considers full-time makes sense.
Is there anybody that's not a seasonal intern that works less hours?
Yes, at this point, Taylor, who is our seasonal employee, there is a little bit of I think we may have talked about this a little bit last week, but there's a little bit of confusion with that particular position because it is seasonal in nature. when I do run it through the Fair Labor Standards Act, the exempt, non-exempt test, it does come out as an exempt position. So technically it's kind of a limited term, but it's just been something that we've reissued every year. It's a little bit of an carry on from the way that it had been done in the past prior to my time. So this is a situation where it does create a little bit of a challenge for that particular position. The Sep program, again, because it is so simple, Taylor has participated in the Sep program. But if we set this limit of 30 hours for full-time, she would no longer be, that position in its current status would no longer be eligible for, would not be eligible for participation in the Virginia retirement system through our program. So,
But if we find they can keep the SEP, if they don't want to join VRE, they'd be fine.
that's correct.
How many hours does Taylor work in total? Or is it just seasonal where there's time she's not working?
It is limited. It is seasonal from the standpoint of it runs from February through the end of October, beginning of February through the end of October. And it's an hourly based position. So it's a little different. It's a little different than a classic part-time position.
You know, this may be something we still have to pursue just a bit, because I kind of thought I heard them say last time when we were on the phone that not everybody had to join VRE, and that kind of implied to me that if they were on the SEP system, they could keep it. But we need to make sure that's the case.
Yes. Yes, and that was one of the other questions, which again, wanted to make sure that we clarified, was whether or not our participation in the Sep program is mandatory for employees, or whether or not it was voluntary. And it technically is set up as a voluntary program. Folks do not need to participate. It is a benefit that we offer. However, we don't have the formality of a form which waives their participation, which basically, does give them the choice. So that is something as we head into this next year that I do want to make sure we incorporate as part of our policy document. And as we're incorporating our benefits package, actually, we do have, we'll talk about the policies here in a little bit, but we do have only one policy in our document that refers to our benefits package, and it talks about the health insurance program. And there's an opportunity to be able to revise that particular policy for more inclusion of our benefits package at this point, which would then be a right spot for incorporation of the minimum hours for the equivalent of full-time and things like that. So I just wanted to, again, just recognize that our program is a voluntary program, and we just need to clarify a few things just so that that's crystal clear. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think if I can, I think from what I understood from the VRS folks last week that there are some regulations that govern the combination of two programs within one agency, and whether it's voluntary or mandatory matters. But I think we probably would need to make sure that before we make a decision or before the board makes a decision, that we can in fact continue to offer SEP to somebody like Taylor because she's not eligible for VRS, or if we could offer it as an alternative to our staff. And I think those are two separate questions, whether somebody who's not eligible could continue on SEP and whether somebody who's eligible could continue on SEP. But what's clear to me is that going forward, anybody who comes in on the organization and is eligible to join VRS would have to join VRS. They would not have a choice. And that's VRS regulations, not ours.
That's what I understood too. We still on?
We are
Yeah.
still,
Nobody has anything to say.
I think at this point, so what we had kind of summarized last week was the idea of looking at requesting up to three actuarial studies. One was the baseline, which basically is the starting from zero, where all employees would be enrolled as members in the VRS system. And then they essentially begin to accrue time toward a vesting status from there. So it's basically starting at zero. The other one was to look at the potential of a more comprehensive study to compare what the costs of incorporating credit up to 30 years, basically to the max that our current employees have in terms of work history and status, as compared to the cost for up to 5 years of credit. So trying to figure out whether or not we can at least get those that have been participating and employees of the district for a long period of time, get them vested, and up to 5 years. So those are the two. And then if that combined study is not favorably looked upon, then go to 3 actuarial studies, which is the baseline, the up to 5 years, and the up to 30 years. So again, it gives us an understanding of what the cost ranges are going to be. It is also my understanding that from our conversation with the VRS representatives last week, that employees can also purchase back service credit time up to 48 months or 4 years of service. So there's the potential that some of our longer term employees could get up to 9 years of service if we decide to go with the 5-year credit as an example. So just something to kind of keep in mind, that is an option.
But for any employee, it takes 5 years to be vested. Is that right?
That's correct.
So somebody like Willie could actually lose time.
Well, in terms, it just, right, it wouldn't be recognized. That time from the retirement system, and this is actually something that they did also clarify on last week, is that the time is not necessarily the amount of time that they have been working for the organization. It's the amount of time that they have been members within the VRS system. Heather, am I saying
Yes,
that?
that's correct.
That's correct.
That's correct.
So it is, so Willie, for example, and even Dan, for the portions of the time in which they would have received credit or would have been able to purchase time back, they still did receive a retirement contribution during that time period. So I don't want to lose sight of that. But in terms of time within the VRS system, several of those years are not going to be necessarily recognized as part of the VRS system. But I don't want to say that they haven't been receiving a retirement, because they have been.
Right, and from what we understand is that once you're vested in the system, then you would be eligible for the benefits of both the defined benefit and the defined contribution portion of VRS when you retire. Now, obviously, if it's somebody like Willie, it's going to be based on whatever purchase credits and then whatever time he serves from now until he retires. It's not going to be based on 30 years of investment, but he would still be eligible for both those portions, as well as having whatever he's invested in his Sep, whatever has been put into his Sep account on his behalf in the last however long we've been doing SEP, 25 or so years.
So I don't know if there are any other questions. I think at this point, I think that there were a lot of questions that we had that did receive some answers on Thursday. And again, Heather has done a great job in pulling together a lot of background information for us to kind of help inform us with this decision as well. Again, we're at kind of the information gathering stage. The actuarial studies are definitely part of that information gathering as well. We'll have more information once those studies are done. And then that's when some decisions will ultimately need to be made. So, and Heather, there were a couple of next steps. Can you seem to recall what those are?
Well, I think the one was I am following up with Zayanne Allen, who is my main point person there. And I'm going to talk with her about the studies that we want to request, as Laura has just outlined. And then she will help us develop the letter that we need to send, a very official document with certain protocols to VRS requesting the actuarial study. Then they will do that. And I believe that they said that it would probably be about 90 days for the actuarial study to be completed. They come back to, the actuarial study actually is done by a third party that VRS contracts with. The study comes back to VRS and they review it to make sure that everything is in order and to make sure that it really seems like it's a good plan for us. And then they share it with us, and then we have an opportunity to ask questions and to decide whether or not this is something we want to do. And then from that point, assuming we make the decision, then we move into actually enrolling in VRS, and that's when some timelines for when that would start and other stuff like that happens. And I believe that they said, I don't have it right here in front of me, but I think it's about 6 months from the time that they do the actuarial study to folks actually being enrolled. So, it's not a quick process, but then again, I'm not sure we want it to be. I think we probably need time to study and to do some of the analysis, as John is suggesting, to see what's going to work best for our employees and for the district.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I know that one of the things that our VRS representatives talked about was having a general idea of when we would like to initiate the program as well. And I don't know about, but hearing that timeline and then again, thinking about giving ourselves a little bit of space for decision making and thinking through again, the number of different scenarios that we've talked about with some of our employees and wanting to give them the time to make an informed decision. It seems to me, I don't want to just make it sound like we couldn't do this in the middle of the fiscal year, but beginning this at the beginning of FY 2022, which would be July 1st, 2021, seems reasonable to me. And I don't know if maybe that's something that we can recommend as a general start date for this. I don't know how Chris and John and Heather, how you all feel about that. Do you feel like we could do it sooner than that?
Well, I don't know if there are any tax implications for individuals that would work on the calendar year rather than a fiscal year. I don't think there is, unless you start doing the SEP investment by yourself.
And that is the challenge, is the SEP investment I think only employers can make a contribution into the SEP. So unless they're making a separate contribution into a separate 401k IRA, I don't think that they could make a contribution into the SEP.
Yeah, but there's also the ability of whether you participate in an employer's plan And if you don't, and it depends whether it's offered or whether you participate, and I'm not sure of the differential there, but if you're not participating, you might be able to do your own. And it wouldn't be a contribution, by us, but it would be by the individual. And I'm not sure how those tax rules, the whole thing is pretty darn confusing.
Yeah, I think if we wanted to, and some of it may depend on what they come back with, but I think for the tax reasons, if we wanted to make sure we weren't going to run into a problem with that, we might want to try to start at the beginning of the calendar year instead of the beginning of the fiscal year. But again, that may be something we need to clarify before we set that date, is what those implications would be. Because I know that on our when I'm doing our W-2s, we do check the box that says, is there a retirement program, even though it's not one that the employees contribute to.
I tend to think that the calendar year works better for people rather than the district.
So do I.
Well, and one thing to also recognize is that the rates change on a fiscal year basis. So we would be, whatever rate is identified as as part of that actuarial study and that we agree to, would begin from the date of our program and then would change, if memory serves me right, on July 1st, 2022.
Yes, because it's a 2-year rate until you hit a fiscal year cutoff, right?
Correct. So it's just, that's just something else to keep in mind. Heather, I think maybe that's a question for Zaanne.
Mm-hmm.
If you wouldn't mind, as maybe she can give us some guidance on that, in terms of again, I think we're all being very conscientious of what will work best for our employees, and I really appreciate that lens in which we're looking through this.
Hopefully the actuarial study shows that this is sort of a no-brainer for all the staff, and the costs are enough that we can cover the 5-year or the 4-year investment period. And if that happens, I don't think you need an awful lot of financial analysis by any of the staff people to decide it's a beneficial thing to go into.
That's what I'm hoping as well. So we'll see once we get these actuarial studies completed. So I do just want to recognize that as Heather was mentioning, it sounds as though it's about a 6-month minimum between the initiation of the studies and all, and being able to enroll employees. So that would take us right to December 31st, essentially. So the end of the calendar year. So so that's good timing. So we will see. We will see. Jerry, do you have any questions or anything that you might like to add?
No, I'm just enjoying the conversation. I would note you were taking 40 minutes out of the hour and a half. Start with something that's not on the agenda, but what the hey, it's good information. And I think we owe it to the staff to be very cautious and judicious about this. And you are. So.
Great. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Sounds good. So a couple of next steps there, and again, from a policy perspective, we'll incorporate the clarification on policies and the 30 hours for full-time equivalent within our policy document. So you'll see that on Tuesday, tomorrow, or at tomorrow's board meeting as recommendations.
So what do we do? Is it beneficial to us to decide on the 30 hours full-time and the voluntariness of the step now, or prepare the needed documents but not vote on it until we see what happens with the actuarial studies, which I think is a better is not to vote on something ahead of time that might tie us up later.
These two items would relate more toward, I'm not sure that it makes a difference because I think we need to define those two items. As an organization, we need to define who would be eligible for participation in our benefits package. And it sounds as though that would have implications on, I'm sorry about the noise. That would have implications on who would be involved in terms of which employees would be involved in the actuarial study as well.
Mhm.
I see Heather nodding.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we have to have these in place before we go forward with the actuarial study because they do affect what we ask.
In the county, with people that work between 20 and 30 hours, is there any partial retirement system that's contributed to by the county?
I don't know. I don't know. The county has a separate retirement system. They're not part of VRS.
Well, how about health then?
For health, they do have a prorated health insurance that is available.
So 30 hours is fully covered, but 20 hours is not.
Correct.
The amount of the employee contribution is flip-flopped. So
Yes.
with the full-time, the employer pays the lion's share, and in the part-time, the employee pays the lion's share, roughly.
And prorated if you're 22 or 23 or whatever hours.
It's just part-time. I think under 20, you're not eligible. Between 20 and 30, you're part-time. 20 and 29 and a half, you're part-time. And then 30 and above, you're considered full-time.
Well, we won't want you to drop down to 29 hours then.
Thank you.
No.
Do we even need a part-time for us, a part-time definition?
I want to say that some of this has been defined for us by some of the federal regulations that have come out, where gosh, I'm not feeling like I'm necessarily prepared to answer that question right off the cuff, John. And I'm a little embarrassed to say that, but I want to say that the 20 hours was a definition of when health insurance benefits needed to be offered at a part-time rate. And so that is, again, because we fall under the county's health insurance program, we pretty much follow that number, and the rates in which they set as it relates to that. But I recall that was something probably within the last 7 years, where there was a minimum hours worked that had to be identified in order for participation. Employers had to offer health insurance, I believe at the 20-hour per week rate.
It sounds to me that we're pretty much agreed on 30 hours and above being full-time. Below 20 hours is not counted, and the difference is, or the confusion is between 20 and 30. We probably need to scratch our heads over that just a bit, whether it's considered part-time or considered anything.
I think they're considered part-time up to 30 hours. And then at 30 hours, they're considered full-time.
But as far as we're concerned.
Laura, if I can just jump in, the only thing that I wondered about, and you and I had talked about this, is that's Fairfax County policy and it may be driven by federal regulations, I don't know. But if we want to just put in our own policy manual that we follow Fairfax County, and employees who work between 20 and up to 30 hours are considered part-time for the purposes of health insurance. And that would be people who are not seasonal or limited term. Excuse me, whose positions are not seasonal.
Which would not address retirement at all.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, that sounds like something we should do anyway.
I agree.
Okay.
What happens under 20 hours in the county? Is that temporary or?
They become, those positions are, yes, they're just ineligible. Actually, they become hourly employees for the most part. I'm not sure. To be quite honest, I'm not 100% sure how they classify those particular employees below 20 hours. They may just be exempt employees and exempt from participation in the benefits package. But again, because it's clearly defined, they can state it in that particular way.
But we want to make sure for Taylor's benefit that we understand how she fits in.
Yes.
It may need to be a redefinition of that position.
Yeah. Seems like an awfully confusing position to me when we were talking the other day.
It is
I think
important.
it's better if she sells more rain barrels.
Sorry, say that again.
And her position's more secure if she sells more rain barrels.
That is true. That is true.
If she gave me a rain barrel for doing some stuff like 15 years ago, and now I feel guilty that I didn't pay for it and I gypped her out of part of her earnings.
No, I think you're in. I hear you. Well,
Contributions always accepted, Chris.
yes, contributions always accepted. Said there, John.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. That's
By the
true.
way, I see that she could give or sell some rain barrels to other districts too. Did you see that note?
I did. I thought that was a interesting. I'm not sure. Well, that's a conversation for another time. But
Yeah, it is. It is.
I did see that. So are we okay moving forward on that? Heather, I saw you writing some things down. I wrote some things down. Maybe we can compare some notes once we wrap up here and make sure that we've got our action items figured out here. So the next thing I just wanted to touch base on was the 2021 grant agreements from DCR. And Chris, did you happen to get a copy of those or have the opportunity to review them?
That's the one that was 60 pages long, right?
Well, one of them was, yes. The grant agreements are usually about 13 pages or so. But
which number was that?
that would have been 3A and 4A.
Okay,
I'm
3A.
looking at 3A right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I am too.
Okay, let me pull up
And
3A.
attachment A has the deliverables.
That's correct. So that starts on page 5. And so I wanted to just kind of walk through the deliverables and again, just acknowledge that how fortunate we are that there have been no changes to the amount that it has been provided to us from previous years. It stayed static, which is really great considering all of the challenges that we are faced with at this particular time. So our total amount that we would expect to receive in 4 disbursements is $105,183 for total administrative and operational support. And again, that is consistent with years past. So in terms of the deliverables, from what I am seeing, they are pretty consistent with what we have done. And again, we're looking at just the administrative and operations grant agreement and deliverables. So the deliverables include local promotion of the various programs in which we support DCR with, including the environmental education programs and the TMDL developments and conservation planning programs, nutrient management planning and things like that. We do promote all of these. Most of them are through many of the programs that Willie does, although we also support the county in meeting a number of these different initiatives as well. We provide and continue to deliver and prepare partnerships and deliver natural resource conservation programs, holding monthly meetings with a quorum of our board of directors, our long-term strategic plan, which is under development as well, our annual plan of work, which will be under development and incorporated really into our first strategic plan as well. I'm sorry, our first annual plan of work for this new strategic plan will be incorporated. Our meeting minutes, attachment D, which this year, because of the COVID, there was a number of grant deliverables. These were all consistent with previous ones. But a lot of these grant deliverables, there was some leniency that was provided, and attachment D and some of the deadlines associated with a number of our programs were scratched as a deliverable for this year. So submitting our attachment E's, following the desktop procedures guide, acting on any audit findings or grant deliverable assessments that are provided by the Soil and Water Conservation Board. Attachment F, there are a number of different trainings that are involved, including FOIA training, records management training. Sometimes there is a QuickBooks training, but there's a number of different trainings that are for administrators like Heather and myself, technical staff, and board of directors. And so attachment F, which is in this, I think it's the last page, highlights all of the various trainings that would be incorporated and required.
Are we caught up with everything of all the staff and you guys?
I'm sorry?
Are we caught up with all that? There's a fair number of things there.
Yes, we are. We are. So again, many of them happen to fall kind of in the June timeframe. So things like the agricultural cost share program, for example, gets pushed off into June, and it's really for the next fiscal year. So Willie participated last June for this current fiscal year. So that was covered. The FOIA requirements, I take the online training. You all did a great job of participating in those as well, participating in the orientations. Heather serves as our records retention officer, and so she participates in a number of those programs as well. So yes, we are caught up.
Laura, it seems to me that in recent years, they've focused more on elected directors than appointed directors. However, as you're filling out these attachments, when it comes to training like FOI and so on, I have taken all that training too. So we might just note that somehow in the attachments.
And we do, when it comes to the FOIA training or COIA, the conflict of interest training, those are the two key ones for the board of directors that need to be followed up. I actually have to report that to the clerk in Fairfax County. And so she maintains that record, but I have a good record of it as well. And John, I do include those as well.
And I've had both.
Yes. Yep. So she's got all of the records, and to me, just like you said, it's nice to just be able to acknowledge that that we're going above and beyond, which is fantastic. So I think for the most part, that's really it. I don't see anything that concerns me about the deliverables or the way that they will be ranking the deliverables, as you'll see in attachment C, which is the evaluation that Debbie does complete every year for us. she sends out a questionnaire, which is very long and extensive, but I provide that back to her with just a confirmation of, yes, we've had a quorum, or, you know, we've had great representation from our board at all the board meetings, and this, that, and the other. And so she uses that to just kind of check some of these things off. But I'm happy to say Heather and I keep in close communication with Debbie, and it's usually pretty easy for her to fill this out. Or if there are any questions, she usually just follows up and asks.
For whatever it's worth, on these deliverables, I didn't have any problem either.
Yeah, they're pretty consistent. I'm happy to say, Chris, I'm not sure you've had a chance to really see these before, but they are consistent with what we have done. So I'll just point out, I'm looking through the evaluation form right now, and it says an annual plan of work was prepared and substantially followed, with board progress reviews conducted and documented at least twice annually. What we typically do is we do a midpoint review, or we'll acknowledge that we've reviewed the annual plan of work, things look good, we're continuing to move forward. And then certainly once we do the end of year review, that counts as well. So those are the two. The annual plan of work is something I review regularly, and certainly if there's anything that comes up, I make sure to share it with the board as well. So, but that's how we complete that. And it's not just checking the box. I mean, it's good business to have a good annual plan of work and a good strategic plan. So,
Great.
other than that, again, it looks as though there may be an accounting for districts or a QuickBooks training that may be coming up this year. We've been able to, Heather and I actually both participated in these programs a couple of years ago, and DCR has been kind of honoring that for the last couple of years. There may be some additional ones that are coming up, and so we'll just need to make sure that we get those on Heather and my timeline. And of course, any board member is also welcome to participate in any of those as well. Heather could teach those classes.
I'd still like to do the QuickBooks sometime.
Good, good. Heather,
I would like that too, John. It would be fun to show you around.
pretty proud
We'll
of
try.
I haven't used it for like 20 years.
It's changed a little bit.
I
And
bet.
it may be set up a little different than what you used.
And I don't use it in my own company.
Okay. Well, so I do just want to acknowledge again, on attachment F is where you'll see the training topics and courses. And again, the district directors, the new director trainings, and the FOIA, and I'm actually surprised they don't have FOIA on here as well. But those would be the ones that the district directors would need to do. I think for FOIA, you just need to do it every 2 years. So we're really off the hook. Hopefully nobody is planning on leaving this year. That would be really great to have some consistency. But we're really well caught up at this point for the directors. There are a number of other recommended trainings that are also here. And the state has given us access to the Commonwealth of Virginia's Learning Center. So many of these things, such as personnel management and things like that, do fall under that COVLC, however they pronounce that, COVLC. And you can, if you're at all interested, you're able to participate in those. The agricultural cost share program update that's provided by DCR does take place every June. And so that is something we typically send Willie to, so that he's got the most current information. I've gone to those in the past. It is very broad in terms of what they discuss. Our TRC meetings are actually much more in depth in terms of looking at all of the different plans and different projects. And so there's a lot of great information that we're able to share through those TRC as well. On the district administrative staff, the FOIA officer, as you've designated me as your FOIA officer. Heather does do the QuickBooks training and the accounting for districts, as do I. The IT security course, actually Willie participates in that because he is the one who goes and does quite a bit of work within the DCR tracking system and all. Heather has participated in our Library of Virginia records retention. So you can see there's a little bit of division of some of these different responsibilities as well. So on the technical staff side, the agricultural program, most of these fall under Willie. And Willie does a great job of keeping us in the loop with a number of these things. He also has responsibilities of attending different trainings and webinars and things like that to keep up with his certifications. And he does track that and report that annually as well. So I think we can recommend approval and execution of this grant agreement for FY 2021 tomorrow, unless there's any other questions that you might have for this one. Again, this is the admin ops.
It's very unrelated to approval, but on the training, does it make sense to alternate every year with different people so there's backup training? Or is they change enough that it's really important to stay updated for the people that use it all the time?
Do you have a specific one that you're thinking about? Are you thinking about like the ad cost share?
Well, in the security stuff,
Mhm.
record retention is pretty straightforward, but I just didn't know if some of this stuff, if we, if say Willie decided to retire next year,
Mm-hmm.
where would we be on some of the knowledge here?
Well, to be quite honest, we don't access the tracking system as regularly as some other districts, because it is related to agricultural cost share programs. So what typically happens is Debbie is very generous with her time, and she has supported us. So when I came on board, for example, there were a couple of reports that needed to be done. They're very simple, and she was able to process some. So that's a little bit of a backup, but you're right. There's an opportunity this year for others to participate in that IT security course.
Okay, well, that's just something to think about.
And we probably should.
Okay.
I don't have a problem voting on this tomorrow for approval.
Okay. So what we'll do is, if you all feel comfortable with it, is we'll say the finance committee did review this, and we're recommending approval of that particular grant agreement. Do you feel that there's a need to go in more detail
Do
tomorrow?
we have to vote on that as a finance committee?
No, we would be recommending approval.
Okay.
By the
And
board.
that's just the district ops one. We still got to deal with cost share.
That's right.
Chris, this is Jerry. Why are you reticent to approve moving forward with it?
I'm not. I just didn't know if we needed to vote on it and make it formally.
Oh, okay.
We certainly could, Chris.
Tomorrow.
Kind of your call.
Yeah, we'll just do it tomorrow. I already switched to 4A for the cost share one now.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to look at the grant agreement. This is the policy that's about 90 pages long or 60 pages long. And that it's really just full of a lot of the different conservation efficiency factor information and all. They're really the only changes that have come up this particular year. And again, if we go to attachment A with the deliverables, is again, we are committing to delivering the ag cost share program. We do have a couple of projects, as you all know, that are in the pipeline right now that Willie has been working really hard on, trying to with the cooperators in order to move forward. And we did defer setting aside any of our funds this year so that we could feel a little bit more comfortable breaking ground and showing the work as we headed into the new fiscal year. And so as you all recall, we transferred our FY20 funds over to Loudon at our May board meeting. So we've established primary and secondary considerations, and we're committing that we're going to follow through with those. And those will be coming before the board this month for approval. As you might recall, we reviewed those last Tuesday. Yes, last Tuesday at the TRC meeting. And Willie has shared those preliminary secondary considerations with DCR, and they have reviewed them and have preliminary accepted them until they are accepted by the board. Essentially, we are committing to, if we do have a cost share project, we are going to obligate 90% of the ag cost share funds to participants, or transfer those funds to a district in need, issuing the IRS forms, and making sure that the cost share and tax credit approvals are individually documented within our board minutes. And so we will be making sure that that gets into our board minutes as well once we head into this new fiscal year. There are additional mandatory trainings that we will participate in. And we will again be attending the annual ag cost share training as well. So this year, our total allocation is $60,207. And the way that it is split up right now is that we have a total of $24,289 to implement agricultural cost share programs. So agricultural best management practices. That's quite a bit less than what we had last year. But they have a formula, as you might see within the policy document. They have a formula in which they use the agricultural land use classifications in order to make, in part, there's a number of other factors that they use, but they use that in part in order to come up with this, a number. The biggest change, though, is in the amount of technical assistance funding that's coming to us. And that's $35,918 that will be coming to us for technical assistance funds. And John, you may have some information that you might like to share about how that amount of technical assistance came to be. Is there anything that you want to talk about with some of those conversations you had?
Well, no, historically it's been a percentage of the total TA, but I'm not sure that's still the case. By the way, I hope we know how much technical assistance we actually have the potential to need.
Well, so the way that this works is that if we expend the full amount of the agricultural cost share, basically that $24,000, we are able to retain the $35,918. It's my understanding that any cost share that would be transferred, that a portion of the proportion of technical assistance funds would go along with that. So if we only needed to use 10% of our ag cost share and we needed to transfer the other, 90%, for example, 90% of the technical assistance would go along with it.
Is that how you're reading it today?
That's how I'm reading the grant.
Okay.
FY 2021.
How TA has been calculated has been kind of a mystery for years. And it's been starting as a minimum percentage of the total amount of TA. So I'd have to go back and reread, Laura, how it's being done today, but that sounds like quite a bit of technical assistance for the amount of FA we've got.
It is. And so, John, this goes back to the meetings that you had.
Yeah.
Gosh, yep. I want to say it may have been even 8 to 9 months ago with multiple groups where you were setting a minimum threshold. So that minimum was $35,000. And so sorry, I'll have to go here to the policy document, but that minimum threshold was $35,000. And so that was identified based upon, goodness, I want to say in 2000 and in the early to mid 2000s, there was a minimum amount of funding that was set aside for each district to be able to implement the agricultural cost share program. Regardless of what your rate was, or how much your allocation was for projects. And so that is consistent with those past rates. And then there was a multiplier that was added on regarding the amount of land area and I think for the Chesapeake Bay implementation program, the priority that you are in terms of implementing that. And so that is the little bit of additional funding that is on top of the $35,000. So you're right.
Laura, what's interesting about that, Laura, is that if you look at all those different factors, our district pretty much ranked last in the state in terms of where it might rank. And there was a lot of people on that subcommittee that thought, no, a district like ours should get nothing, not any amount of anything whatsoever. I kind of argued for something because we do have technical assistance that we actually spend, and it ended up with this $35,000 minimum per district.
Yes. So that is certainly the concern is that, and not a concern, but that's certainly how the funds sort of came to be. So we do have, when we think about it, even if we don't utilize the agricultural cost share funds and the allocation that we receive, it isn't necessarily a reflection that we're not promoting the program or encouraging participation or working very closely with property owners in order to set them up so that they understand and could qualify for participation in the program. So that is just something to kind of, keep in mind, is that a lot of times when we have to transfer those funds out, it isn't, we certainly understand that because they're trying to put practices in the ground, but it is not a reflection of us not working hard to try and utilize those funds. So
and they recognize that. I think what I'm hearing you say, Laura, if we spend the full 24,000, we keep all the 35. If we spend 50% of it, we have to transfer that 50% of our TA to whoever got the other.
yes. Yes.
Could we lose? This is Jerry. I'm wondering, this recent transfer of money to Loudoun County, didn't we keep all the technical assistance on that?
We did. And it does kind of go back and forth a bit between what the policies say. So there have been years where the technical assistance was required to move with the transfer of funds. And then this past year it was, well, if the two districts agree that the one district should keep the funds, then they can keep them.
Oh,
and
okay.
so it has to be an agreement. That's why this past year we agreed and Loudoun agreed, and that's why we were able to retain the funds.
Thank you.
I did want to just go and make sure I was looking at this right. Yes. So it does say in the policy that technical assistance funding shall proportionally be transferred with the reallocated cost share. So if we do reallocate or transfer any cost share, the TA that is proportional to it will go with it. So I just wanted to confirm that.
Why did it not happen with what we just did? Just because Loudoun agreed?
Loudoun agreed. Yep.
And the possibility still exists in future years. Or it sounds to me like the policy says you got to give them the proportion share of technical assistance.
The policy says right now that we shall proportionally give technical assistance.
Can,
Right.
can we make an exception to that policy for ourselves? I mean, are we supposed to approve this and say, yeah, we'll do whatever the state told us to, or do we have the option of saying, no, we'd like to do like we did last year and go by an agreement between the districts? Is that an option?
I don't think that's an option.
Okay.
Laura and Chris and Jerry, can I make just another kind of a historic and comment about technical assistance?
Sure.
I think it's just kind of interesting because it kind of goes back for a long time to what was going on in USDA between the old ASCS, which is now the Farm Service Agency, and the Soil Conservation Service. ASCS used to have all the program delivery, and we would provide an SCS all the technical assistance. And all that they ever allowed us to get back from ASCS on the program side for the technical assistance amount was 5% of the total construction cost of the practices. We argued for years that that was insufficient, that we were spending a lot more than that providing the technical assistance. And we actually documented where that was closer to 20% of the project cost. And the state had that same difficulty in calculating the actual amount of technical assistance that it cost them to do the work on the various projects. So that's kind of the historic background. Right now, I'm not even sure that 20% would be accurate. Do we have any feel ourselves? Does Willie have some feel as to what his real technical assistance costs are?
So we do run the attachment D every year. For the implementation of the agricultural cost share program, the attachment D is what we use to estimate that. And it is typically a little bit more than the $35,000 when we look at our overall programming. So that again, it would probably be the best reference. The interesting thing is, I mean, the implementation of the project is one thing, but there's so much that goes into getting cooperators to that point of breaking ground. The planning side of it and the discussions and things like that, that I don't know if we've, when I do the attachment D, I do take some of that into consideration, but it varies depending upon the cooperator. So I think we've got a good average for what it is that we could do. The challenge is with the current agricultural cost share program and the eligibility requirements that are part of it, which is the 5 acre parcel or more, and then the $1,000 in revenue generated through the production of food and fiber, and basically the bona fide agricultural production. We have a lot of 5 acre land areas, but not a lot that actually do the bona fide agriculture. By virtue of that, if we were able to get some modifications for being able to pursue basically many of these agricultural best management practices on equine operations or some of these smaller farms just meaning that they're not making the kind of revenue that you might have with a bona fide agricultural area, that would change things significantly for us. And we'd have I mean, it would almost be a full-time job. It would be a full-time job, just implementing that program alone. But Willie does do a lot of work, and a number of the plans that he does prepare, the sacrifice areas, for example, and for a number of our equine operators, the manure composting facilities, even though they are ineligible for participation in the agricultural cost share program, he is providing information to that same standard with some modifications if there's some reasonable opportunity for that. But we are, in a sense, continuing to administer the ag cost share program. It's just because of the types of projects and because of the types of land use, we're not able to really capitalize on the use of these funds for it. for implementation. Like I said, I can be long-winded at times. Are there any other questions on this particular grant agreement?
And both of those we need to formally approve tomorrow, right?
That's correct.
Yes. Chris, I've got about 8 minutes.
Okay, what else on Laura do we have to discuss right now?
I think that is pretty much it for the grant agreements. Let me go back to our agenda here. So we do have some recommendations. So I think that's it. John, unless there's anything else that you wanted to add about any of the past discussion on TA, I think it sounds like we are in general agreement that we would recommend approval of the grant agreements tomorrow at the board meeting. Yeah.
No, I'm fine. I guess I should take more credit for at least the $35,000.
Yeah, you probably should.
Let me reiterate the question about the technical assistance. Are we giving away the ability, as we have in the past, to keep all the TA and just pass on the cost share? Sounds to me like what we do with Loudoun County will become contour policy if we approve the policy. How do we keep that money? Like you say, Laura, we're spending it.
I think what we need to do is I'm a little less concerned about it this particular year because we do have those projects in the pipeline.
Gotcha.
However, what I would recommend is next year when the draft grant agreement comes out, that we do take the time to really review it. And if we want to make a case for giving the ability of the districts to come to an agreement on whether or not the district may retain it, that we push for that.
Gotcha. So how certain is Willie that we're going to have some actual cost share projects? You're pretty sure?
Pretty soon. We will likely be bringing those forward within the first quarter. And then basically first half of the fiscal year.
But it looks like we'll be able to use up the lion's share of both the technical assistance and the cost share.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Then it's a moot point for another 6 or 9 months.
It is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on your agenda was the fiscal procedures and recommendations for policy document revisions.
Yes. So technically every year we are supposed to review the DCR's procedures for fiscal operations. Now, this is a rather detailed document that comes out from DCR that basically they use to audit districts on. It used to be a guidance, and a few years ago they made it procedures. So it went from you should to you shall. To be quite honest, much of the information that is within this document are things that we already do and have incorporated into our financial controls document and into our policies. We've been making some big strides over the last few years in order to incorporate a number of things, and along with recommendations that have come from audits. Heather and I did take some time to review the recommended, the summary of the updates that were made, and to just kind of cross-check that with our current controls and to see where there might be a need for additional refinements to our policy or additions to our policy, or just some general changes to our policy as well.
And John and Jerry, do you have their Word document that they prepared for that? Proposed revisions to the district's policy document?
Yeah, I did send that out. Now what I wanted to just mention is that all of these changes have not yet been made to our policy document. When we did start to go through them, just because of the time constraints between the receipt of the financial controls document and our meeting tomorrow, we did not have the time to be able to incorporate all of these changes. So what I would like to recommend is that Heather and I take the next few months to work on incorporating these recommended changes into the policy document. There is some language, for example, that we just want to make sure is very clear, and then bring that to the board in September. Or we'll keep you informed if there is a need to prolong it any further than that. But this will give us some time. We just wanted to make sure that we could crosswalk it with our current policies, and again, identify where there are some needs to make some sufficient changes.
Laura, this is John.
Mm-hmm.
I think Chris was referring to the desktop procedures for district operations. Did we send out a copy? Do all directors have a copy of that? I know I do.
I didn't know if you sent it to everybody or just the finance committee when you did that.
I sent that just to the finance committee.
That's why I asked to see if Jerry had it. And most of that stuff looks pretty darn boilerplate.
Yeah.
It is. It is. There are just a few things that, again, just for clarification purpose, we just wanted to make sure that were incorporated into our policy document as well. I mean, by all means, we could just reference the fiscal procedures, but actually a number of our practices go a little bit above and beyond some of the recommendations as well. So as an example, the fiscal procedures guide states that or recommends that any check that's over $1,000 requires dual signatures. We require dual signatures on all checks. Just again, it's an opportunity for just cross-checking and things like that. Let me take a look here and see. There were a couple of items that were a little bit more substantial. Some of this is just writing down what our current procedures are and just memorializing them that way. But there were some things that are going to have to actually cause a change to the way we do things, including Chris, you have a few more obligations that you'll have to do. For example, in the fiscal document, it states that the treasurer or a director must approve, and basically approval by initial, the statement of reconciliation for our credit card. So that's one example. So there's going to be a little bit of a change associated with the time commitment as well. So Heather and I are talking about that a little bit and some ways of being able to do that. One other more substantial
Does
policy
that mean I need to look at every month's statement?
Yes,
prior to our paying it.
How complicated are they?
not.
Okay.
We actually do so staff fill out the little vouchers. Whenever they use the credit card, they get approved. I reconcile the statement by putting the vouchers with any backup documentation, and then I actually do a reconciliation in QuickBooks, prepare the check, and so you would just have a package that you could see very clearly what we were doing. But it does mean that we would need to schedule a time during the month for either you to come into the office or for us to meet somewhere so that you could take a look at it.
I don't want to delay stuff, and particularly if I'm not here. Can that be done electronically with the approval?
I'm not sure. I mean, Chris, one of the things that you could do if you know that would be out of the area is we can designate another director who has, I think they have to have check signing authority, but just designate that that other director would be available to basically work in your stead. And it'll be a communications thing with, Heather and I commit to just keeping good communication and open communication. And so if there is any concerns, we can certainly let you know about that too. But the only complicating thing is our bill and our remittance of payment is prior to the TRC meeting, I think, and the board meeting.
Right.
So
Comes just after the board meeting.
yes,
The closing date is the 27th of the month. So one of the
Right.
things, if I may, Laura, that we discussed was talking to the credit card company about changing our closing date to a date that would allow you to review it at the board meeting, so that we wouldn't have to have a separate time during the month when you had to look at things. And it's also possible we could do something like we've done with the attachment E, I suppose, where you look at the materials electronically and I mail you something or you print something that you sign and you send it back to us and we include it. DCR is keen on wet signatures. So
On what signatures?
wet as opposed to dry.
That's what they call them, huh?
as opposed to electronic.
Yeah. How many credit card uses a month are there?
Probably 8 to 10.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if it was
Yeah.
10 or 100.
Yeah, no. It depends on the season. Obviously, during a normal spring, there would be more
Yeah.
during March and April and May. But I think generally speaking, it's around 8, 10, 12, something along those lines.
That's not difficult.
No, it's pretty straightforward. It's usually just on one page. It's not like my personal credit card statement that takes up 3 or 4 pages.
That's what I was envisioning.
I just as reference, I several months ago, I asked my credit card company to change the date that they ended up wrapping it up, and they had no problem. It was just a matter of a phone call.
Good
So
to know.
hopefully it works that way with
I've done that because I wanted to line everything up. The only one I couldn't was the gas bill. But, would it make sense to try and do it before the TRC meeting? And then there's 2 opportunities to do it in person, and that still wouldn't make us late as long as you have time to prepare stuff.
that would be fine too. Yeah,
Except Heather doesn't go to the TRC meeting.
that's true, but I can carry it on her behalf.
Yes, and I provide the M&Ms, so assuming we get back to that someday.
Oh, so you assume that if I just put my signature in the M&M bowls as I emptied the bowl?
Exactly. No, it's going to work like this. If you don't sign it, you don't get any M&Ms.
Oh, okay. Well, that's incentive.
Or better yet, you have to get through all of the M&Ms. That's your incentive to get down to the, I don't know. I don't know if that's an incentive or not. But anyway, yeah, I think we can absolutely, try to make it work. We want to make it, Chris, it would be wonderful to see you at the beginning of the month too. But we want to make this as least complicated as possible.
And without delaying things.
Right. I think that was really the only other substantial thing. There was a really nice example of a vehicle use policy that was incorporated into the desktop procedures, and that we could take a look at. Our current policy is pretty light. And I think it just helps to set some good tone by just expanding on it, just care for it and things like that. The Fairfax County Division of Vehicle Services or Department of Vehicle Services has some good information as well. And because it is a county-owned vehicle that we are leasing, it's a nice, it will be nice to just, no, I'm sorry. It's a county-issued vehicle that we have purchased, but it is they just have some nice guidelines since we do utilize the gas pump and a number of other benefits as well. So there's some changes to be made. Again, I'm proud to say that our policies, for the most part, go above and beyond what is required within the desktop guide or are already consistent with it. I think Heather and I have strived to follow general accounting principles and different things like that. And then certainly we see any audit that we have as an opportunity to further refine our programs and reduce the risk of fraud and different things like that. So I think we're in pretty good shape, but it will take some time to make sure that we incorporate all of these different changes and some of this information in a way that is clear. And that's why we're recommending incorporating these over the next few months as opposed to trying to cram them all in tomorrow.
That makes sense to me. We only have a few minutes left before John drops off. Is there anything else, John, you need to say?
I think he left already.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think you did.
I have documents up, not in the screen, so I didn't see.
He may have jumped off and there was an email that came through almost immediately afterwards. So there may be some additional insights that he has that he'll follow up via email. But otherwise it's, so we can just make reference to these different policy documents. And again, just acknowledge that we'll make those enhancements over the course of this next quarter.
John's email just said he's leaving.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to talk about now that John's gone?
The only other thing that I was going to encourage us to talk about today is scheduling a next round of meetings for the Finance Committee. It's hard to believe, but we end the fiscal year and then it's like we ramp right back up into budget season. And so I would like to schedule a time. Of what has worked really well over the last couple of years is setting up a time to meet with the Finance Committee to talk about what our approach is for the budget for the upcoming year, hear about go over the budget for the current fiscal year, close out the reports and fiscal books basically for the previous fiscal year. We also will be making some modifications. There's likely going to be some reserve funds coming in this year, which is good news. But there's an opportunity to redistribute some of those unallocated funds into more of a dedicated reserve. And we can talk about some of that and we can come up with a bit of a proposal of what we would like to do. Usually early August is when we have that meeting. Again, all the June reports will come in July, and we'll be kind of closing up the books for the year in July and early August. So what I would like to recommend is that we look to meet again in early August, maybe twice in August, to go over the approach, come up with the approach together. And then Heather spends a lot of wonderful time pulling together reports for the last fiscal year for budget preparations headed forward. Would that sound okay? Looking at
Yes,
maybe,
it does.
so we can look at that first or second week of August for a follow-up meeting?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Any particular date in mind that you would like us to avoid? Any big vacations going on at that time? Sending
I'm
kids?
not planning to go anywhere at the moment, but that's still a month and a half away, so you don't know what the heck's going to happen.
True. Okay. Well, then we'll take a look and get a date on the calendar, but we'll be looking to meet again on that first or second week of August.
Okay. Does that end our discussion?
I think so. Jerry, I don't know if you wanted to give a little, I don't want to put you completely on the spot, but Jerry and I have had a really good conversation about strategic planning. And one of the things that he has been working on is doing a little bit of an economic analysis. And I don't know, Jerry, if I'm putting you straight here on the spot. with that. Is there anything that you feel that would be beneficial to bring up before our group?
Well, I thought that's why I got an invitation to come to join the meeting. I've shared the same information with Chris. So Heather, you're the only one that probably doesn't know what we're talking about. But Heather, for your benefit, the essence is that we track the tasks that we do, the projects that we do, not just by goal and objective of the plan, the annual plan and the long-term plan, but by who's paying for them. So that we develop some fiscal accountability to the people who are paying our salaries. Well, they're not paying me anything, but for the rest of the operation. And I think a good case came up just in this discussion, and that is the technical assistance fund for the agricultural cost share program. Can we turn around and say, here are the hours that Willie actually spent doing that to justify keeping the technical assistance, even though we don't use it, even though we don't actually have a project that uses the cost share. If we track this time doing that, then we'll be able to turn around and state and not just negotiate with them, but say, no, listen, this is a real cost to us. What do you want us to do? The people who call into things that need to be done certainly fall within our purview, but for which, because of the definition of cost share, we can't use the cost share money for. Without that data, we're just negotiating. We're not really demonstrating, what it is we do. And so I know, you all have already, Laura was explaining to me how the district, has set up a timesheet program, which to me is the biggest negative for doing, the kind of task-based cost accounting that I'm promoting. And since it's already done, then maybe, if we haven't had a really terrible, backwash from the staff, that accounting for the time by payee is more paperwork, but it's not more, being discussed from the staff, hopefully. So that's my case.
So, yep, and I think as we, again, are heading into strategic planning and some of these other aspects, there's some opportunity there to, again, just as Jerry was saying, demonstrate the value that we're providing. And I think in a way, as a way of being able to analyze the obligations in which we are required to meet from DCR for that funding source, or the MOU and agreements that we might have with others, being able to demonstrate what it actually takes.
Right.
And I think that's really good. Also, from an accountability standpoint for ourselves as an organization, what it takes to meet the things that we're saying we would like to do. And using it both from an accounting standpoint, the post, but also forecasting what it is that we might be able to need and what we might need headed forward. So I think it's really good.
Laura, I harken back to the slide that you use incorporated into your presentation when you're telling the public about what the district does. List all the changes that the district has been at the forefront of for decades. And I think in order to stay there, be that leading edge, we need to know what we can promise and what it costs us. And so that's there needs to be some place in one of the tasks that we delineate. We have some time in there for coming up with new stuff. And
Exactly.
who do you build that to? Okay, those kind of discussions need to be had, and we might want to assign responsibilities for just doing just that type of thing. Much more nebulous than somebody saying, here's some technical assistance money for VCAP or ag cost share. But nevertheless, we want to build that into the way we manage our staff, manage our intellectual resources. So I'd like to see us do that. Now, it seems to me the next step is to take the list of tasks that that you have come up with that staff is currently tracking the time with, and see if each one can be assigned to a specific payee.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's one of our internal projects like the supporting the Potomac Watershed Roundtable, or the kind of the general slush fund we get from the state, or Fairfax County or whatnot, and see how, you know, what's going to take to track that. And Heather, I don't know whether QuickBooks provides the kind of project management tool that Chris and I were used to using in the business, but you know, being able to give each key person for whatever task it is, a monthly output says, hey, here's what was predicted to be used, and here's what you actually use. So they can kind of manage their own time, figure out how much emphasis they want to put on the different things, instead of just, you know, who was the last guy to call them on the phone.
Right. Well, I think you're right that the fact that we already have this timesheet and the folks are used to completing it is a definite plus in this. And I also think, and Laura probably mentioned this when you all were talking, is we've recently completely revamped our timesheet to allow for that kind of analysis. So although I don't think QuickBooks will help us particularly, QuickBooks does have a classification where we can talk about what expenses are being put to individual projects, but it doesn't really integrate very well with a time element. And it doesn't. I don't think it would work for us with what we want to do. But
Okay.
the way we have it right now, the way the timesheet works is that for each 2-week pay period, there's a section on the bottom where the individual can see what percentage of their time they're spending on various projects. And then that links back to an overall spreadsheet that Laura can look at to show how much time is being spent by everyone on these specific projects. So I think the only thing that we would need to do, and one example that comes to mind is CAP and VCAP program administration are currently, they're separated by task, whether it's admin or field work and that kind of thing. But we would actually need to tease them apart so that Fairfax County funding for CAP would be one thing and state funding for VCAP. But I think that would be a relatively minor update to what we've already put in play. And this is new, Laura, like since November, I think, when we rolled out the new timesheet with the, and I'm sure Laura already said this, but with the express intent of linking it to the strategic plan, and so that we can have a better sense of where we're spending our efforts, our time.
Right. And I guess, you know, that's valuable for planning, being able to track the costs of each task is valuable for our staff managing their time and understanding what kind of budgets they have. And ultimately, going back at the end of the year, and you know, whenever it is during the year that Laura goes and negotiates with the people who make decisions on our funds, and say, listen, you know, you want this done, but you know, here's how much it's costing. We can't find a way to do it any cheaper. You know, give us the money, or we're going to cut the service. I don't recommend you be sound that tough, Laura. But with the data in hand, you know, you can show them this is it. It's not just a matter of saying, well, we'd like to have some more if you have some. No, you want the service pay.
Well, and that's exactly where we're headed. And also, you know, as I mentioned to you, Jerry, we are in some respects in control of our own destiny and how we manage programs and things like that. And if we as an organization decide that we want to be managing this program at a particular level, then we are going to have to figure out a way of being able to do that, whether it's justifying the benefit of it to others, or finding another resource and revenue stream to be able to support it in that regard. So, but yes, what we have not had is the data and the numbers to be able to say, oh yeah, we're really behind on this program, or we're not where we want to be. What do we need to do in order to get it there? Are our resources allocated appropriately? Do we have too much on our plate? Do we have too little on our plate? All of those different kinds of questions we haven't really been able to answer in the past. And so I'm excited about this idea. And I think we're on the same page with where we're headed. We can use it to look back and we can use it to project forward. And that's I think, going to be very beneficial, as we move on. Maybe we can add that to our list of accomplishments, for the 2020s. So clarity, when that's appropriate for
No, I
those.
think the fact that you got the timesheet, issue to the point where you had was actually, I'm really pleased to find that out in talking with you, Laura. I think it's a good idea. I'd be willing, I think it'd be a useful exercise for me and maybe for the whole process for Chris and I and you all, or whoever, to sit down and just kind of talk through the projects. And do we have a unitary funder for one? Or do we have to split something into two, like the cap and the VCAP, into two tasks so that we can track the cost separately? How do we establish, in consulting, we call it the overhead pool and the G&A pool, to be able to load our labor to get the actual reimbursement from our clients.
I think that's one of the things I'd really like to know, that if we're fully recovering our cost, if we do stuff for somebody else, that's kind of extra work for the staff. I think we ought to be doing more than that, and I think we are about a bargain, but we got to make sure we don't cheat ourselves.
Right, and make sure we're not using our lack of knowledge as a reason for not paying our staff what what we think they're worth. So there's lots of benefits from being very clear. Chris and I live this life, as consultants. You had to know where you were. If you lost money, you need to have a pretty damn good excuse. But if you don't even know you're losing it, how do you rectify? How do you manage? So we might get a little more hair trigger when it comes.
Another thing for you to not get bored about is to explore where those costs are and how we recover them if we're doing outside work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is again one of those things of we have a strategic plan, we have an annual plan of work. And the question that I have is, do we have the resources available to be able to really accomplish what we want? So there's some tightening up, and that as an organization we have the opportunity to do, and some a little bit more formality with some of the things that we're doing too. I think these are great discussions for the finance committee, and maybe we even need to have another meeting, between now and August. And Chris, we can certainly work together on kind of coming up with a schedule. These are things that we can incorporate into our financial program plan. And they are aspirational as well. They're things that we can incorporate into our strategic plan as well. So I truly see we're on the same page with this. I think that there is absolutely some ways of being able to better justify our position, some just information we have not had. Or it was not written down in such a way. I really am about documenting so that it's clear and can be consistently followed into the future too. So I think those are absolutely some things. I'm really proud of where we are after 8 years. Heather and I sometimes go back to past reports and we go, whoa, and we've come a long way, but there's still some ways to go.
No, I think for the size of our staff, you all are running this very professionally, and I think we're all proud of that. So let's stick with it. There's some more icing we can put on this cake.
There's some more icing. We got sprinkles.
I'd like to see, just as an overall, and this time, billing labor correctly is part of it. I'd like to see the district become recognized as the in-house environmental consultants for not just for Fairfax County, but any agency in Northern Virginia. I know there are others providing those services, Northern Virginia Regional Commission, COG, et cetera. But I'd like to see us carve out more of a role for ourselves, find more payees to let us have more professional staff.
I definitely think there is some of that opportunity. And one of the things with us having gone through a bit of a SWOT analysis is to really see and define clearly where are current niches and then where there are gaps in where there are niches that could be filled by an organization like ours as well. And so there's definitely some opportunities, and that's a conversation I also look forward to having with the board here soon.
Yeah, me too.
Great.
Thank you very much. Is where we finished, Chris?
I think so. Anything else?
That's all I've got for today. Heather, you get the last word.
See you all bright and early tomorrow morning.
I don't know how bright, but we'll
I
What-
guess just
What
to
time would Mark, 9:30 or 10 or what?
9:30.
9:30.
9:30, but no coffee, so you've got to bring your own.
Yeah, I get pretty good coffee here.
okay. We'll
we
see
will
you all then.
We'll have a short report for you that you can reference, and we'll probably get that out a little bit later on today, with just some of the things that we talked about and the recommendations that came out from today. Like,
I sent Heather a note and asked her to give me the right words to say on the motions.
perfect. Then we're in great shape. But appreciate it. I really appreciate everybody's time, and I'm glad we're able to still connect like this. It's great.
Yeah, this is not bad. Not a bad way to do the meetings, I think.
Yeah, it works.
I
It
agree.
works. Okay, well, Chris, you can adjourn us here, and then we'll.
Okay, we're all adjourned unless you all want to keep talking.
Nope. I'm going to turn off the recording.
Okay.
6 p.m.
Bye-bye.